One letter. That is all it can take to put a Social Security check at risk. Not next year, not someday, right now. Here's the danger most people miss. The clock starts the day that overpayment notice hits your mailbox. There is no loud alarm, no bold second warning that says, stop everything and file this form today. There is only a deadline, a recovery process, and a shrinking window to protect the money you depend on. Most people assume that if Social Security makes a mistake, the agency will catch it before touching their benefit. That is not how this works. If SSA decides you were overpaid, it can start the recovery process unless you respond in time. I'm Marcus Grave, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through the response most seniors never learn until money is already being taken out of their monthly benefit. We'll cover the notice people underestimate, the appeal form for an overpayment you think is wrong, the waiver form that may stop repayment altogether, and the backup form that can lower the amount SSA takes each month. First, do not ignore the notice. Treat that letter like a live financial emergency, not routine government mail. SSA says an overpayment notice explains why the overpayment happened and what your repayment options are. Just as important, SSA says it will wait at least 30 days before starting collection. And if you file an appeal or a waiver request within those 30 days, collection generally does not begin while your case is being decided. That window is where many retirees lose control. Some people set the letter aside because they feel overwhelmed. Others assume the amount must be wrong and expect the problem to fix itself. A few wait for a callback that never comes. By the time they act, the benefit has already been reduced. So make this your first rule. The day that notice arrives, the case is live. Whether you feel ready or not, the countdown has started. Next, if the overpayment is wrong, the form you need is SSA 561. A surprising number of people repay money they may not actually owe. If you believe you were not overpaid or you believe the amount is wrong, SSA says you can challenge that decision with Form SSA-561, Request for Reconsideration. SSA's reconsideration guidance says you generally have 60 days after receiving the decision to request reconsideration. But timing matters for another reason too. If your goal is not only to challenge the notice but also to stop collection before it starts, acting within the first 30 days is even more important. This option makes the most sense when you have a paper trail. Maybe you reported your wages. Maybe you told SSA about a life change. Maybe the number in the letter does not match what you know happened. In cases like that, do not guess, do not panic, and do not send money just because the letter sounds final. File the reconsideration properly. Then comes the form most seniors really need to know, SSA 632. This is the waiver form, and for many retirees it is the most important one of the three. If you agree that an overpayment happened, or you are not sure you can win an appeal, but you believe the situation was not your fault and you cannot afford to repay the money, SSA says you should file Form SSA 632, Request for Waiver of Overpayment Recovery. Read that carefully because this is where many people get confused. A waiver is not a request for more time. A waiver is a request asking SSA not to collect the overpayment at all because repayment would be unfair or unaffordable, and because the overpayment was not your fault. SSA's own guidance says that if you cannot afford repayment and feel the error was not your fault or is unfair, you can request a waiver. SSA also says it will stop recovering the overpayment until it makes a decision on that request. That matters enormously for people living on a fixed income. Picture the widow whose monthly check already disappears into rent, groceries, and prescriptions. Picture the retiree who reported a change but still got hit with a repayment demand. Picture the older worker dealing with a reporting mix-up, a pension issue, or a benefits miscalculation. For people in that position, the biggest question is not always, was there an overpayment? Sometimes the real question is, should this person be forced to repay it at all? That is exactly why SSA 632 exists. Finally, if you cannot stop recovery completely, ask for a lower rate. Not every case ends with a successful appeal. Not every waiver gets approved. And sometimes a person knows some repayment is probably coming, but the amount being withheld would wreck the monthly budget. That is where Form SSA-634, Request for Change in Overpayment Recovery Rate, comes in. SSA says this form is for people who are willing to repay an overpayment but cannot afford the current withholding rate. In plain English, this is the form you use when the agency's repayment pace is simply too much for your budget to survive. That matters because many seniors assume they have only two choices: lose a huge chunk of the check or somehow come up with the full amount SSA wants. In reality, there may be room to request a lower recovery rate instead. There is one more detail you should know. If you receive SSI rather than Social Security, retirement, or survivor benefits, SSA says the withholding rules differ. Its current public guidance says SSI withholding is generally 10%, while the overpayment process still allows for reconsideration, waiver, or a request to lower the recovery rate. Now let me show you how this looks in real life. Imagine a 69-year-old widow named Carol. She opens a letter saying she was overpaid. Her stomach drops. She reads the amount, feels embarrassed, and assumes there is nothing she can do. For almost 3 weeks, she does exactly what many honest people do when they are scared. Nothing. Then her daughter sits down, reads the notice carefully, and sees two things right away. First, Carol may not have caused the problem. Second, there is no realistic way she can repay that amount without falling behind on rent and medication. Instead of waiting longer, Carol files a waiver request. That does not guarantee approval. What it does do is shift her out of panic and into process. It turns silence into action. It replaces automatic collection with formal review. And for many retirees, that shift is the difference between losing control and protecting the check they rely on every month. Before this week ends, here is your action plan. Start with the notice itself. Read it the same day it arrives. Find the date. Find the claimed amount. Find the reason SSA says the overpayment happened. Choose your lane next. If the overpayment is wrong, look at SSA 561. If the overpayment was not your fault and repayment would create hardship, look at SSA 632. If you agree some money is owed back but cannot afford the withholding rate, look at SSA 634. Move before day 30 if you can. SSA says filing an appeal or waiver request within that 30-day period can stop collection from starting until a decision is made. Call Social Security with a clear sentence. I received an overpayment notice, and I need to know whether I should file a reconsideration, a waiver, or a request to lower the recovery rate. Gather proof after that. Keep the notice. Pull your bank statements. Save proof of rent or mortgage, utility bills, prescription costs, income records, and any documents showing that you reported a change or were not at fault. Make copies of everything before you send it, and do not treat one phone call like the finish line. Follow up. Confirm that SSA received the form. Write down the date, the time, the office, and the name of the person you spoke with. If you rely on Social Security, do not wait for a smaller check to get your attention. When that notice shows up, act while the clock still belongs to you. And if you know someone living on a monthly benefit, a parent, a widow, a brother, a neighbor, send this video to them now. Because the people who lose the most are usually not careless. They are the people nobody ever told which form to file.